Hello and welcome to the Mixtape podcast. I am your host, Mark. Thank you so much for joining me on this week's show. Before we get into the chat, just very quickly, if you enjoy the show this week, I would absolutely love it if you left a comment or rated the show 5 stars wherever you are listening. You can find all my social media links, my YouTube channel, and the full radio show on demand just by visiting the mixtapepodcast.com, and there you will find over 175 episodes just waiting for you to discover. Thanks again for listening, and I hope you enjoy this week's episode. Hello and welcome to this week's Mixtape, and today on the show, what an absolute pleasure it is to welcome Peter Cox from Go West. How are you, mate?
I'm very well, Mark. Thanks for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure. Thanks for coming on the show and making the time. So we're chatting about Go West, Australian tour coming to Perth, the Astor Theatre, then you're heading to Sydney, Melbourne, Adelaide, Hobart and Brisbane. It's destroyallines.com for tickets and all the dates and info. 40 years of Go West, Peter. Did you ever think at the start you'd be doing a 40-year tour?
I really didn't, to be honest. When we were in the studio in 1984, making the debut Go West album, I know it's not the most interesting thing for a lot of people, the mechanics of making an album, but from our point of view, we were living the dream. This is the thing that we wanted to do for so many years, and we were getting to do it in a modest but professional studio. No record company looking over our shoulder telling us this should be this and that's not commercial enough and blah, blah, blah. So we were getting to make a really authentic record and, as I say, living the dream. And if you'd asked me in 1984 what my hopes for 1985 were, I would have said, I just hope they let us make another record. That's as far as I was thinking.
Yeah. In terms of the first record, did you spend a lot? You spent a lot of time writing songs together, right? Before you actually sat down and recorded the album. Is that right? You had quite a few songs already in the bag.
We did spend a lot of time messing around writing, but anyone who's followed our career knows that we've never been that timely. We definitely take our time, and we recorded several versions of We Close Our Eyes before the version that audiences might be familiar with. So yes, we had been writing for a long time, but I can't actually tell you that we had a stockpile of 30 songs, 40 songs, because my collaboration with Richard is such that if we weren't getting anywhere with a song, we tended to drop it. So it was only the ones that got to completion that made it onto the album.
And you're touring Australia with Debbie Gibson. Are you friends with Debbie? Did you know her before, or are you just going to meet her for the first time on this tour?
Yeah, I'll be meeting Debbie for the first time. This combination was the idea of Destroy All Lines. I have had some communication with Debbie, who's been very gracious via social media. But I mean, I use social media kind of reluctantly, like an old man would. I know this is what we need to do to promote tours and let people know what we're doing and shows and so on. But she is such a pro, and I know a little bit now about her career, and she's, the Broadway success on the musical stage. She's done some incredible things, and her social media presence it shames me, I have to say.
I know she hasn't been to Australia for quite a long time, and you're a regular visitor. Are you going to give her any, or have you already given her some tips or advice about touring Australia?
Oh, I don't know that I would presume to give Debbie Gibson any advice, but I imagine we'll get to know one another a little bit on the road because we'll be traveling together, obviously working together. And yeah, as you say, Debbie hasn't been to Australia for decades, so I'm sure she's really looking forward to it. I'm sure her fans are really looking forward to it, and I hope it's going to be a good combination.
I wanted to talk to you about your voice, Peter, because I've been looking at some YouTube videos and recent live stuff. Your voice sounds amazing for the amount of time you've been using it. Is it something that you consciously make a special effort to really look after, or are you just sort of one of those people who's annoyingly genetically blessed with great vocal cords that don't need that much sort of maintenance?
Well, first of all, thanks very much for the compliment. I definitely used to take my voice very much more for granted than I do now. Now I take the responsibility of people paying money for a ticket to see Go West, to see me, hear me sing. I take that responsibility really seriously because I'm such a lazy concert goer. I barely ever go to shows. So I appreciate the effort and the trouble that people go to come to shows. And so therefore, when I'm up there doing my best to sound as good as I can, if I have a bad night, because of course a voice is an unpredictable thing, I will be very self-critical, but I don't want the reason for that to be that I didn't look after myself. And so anyway, it's a very long-winded answer to your question, but yeah, it's about it's about really boring things. It's about getting sleep. It's about drinking loads of water. I did a festival some years ago, and the act on before Go West was Leo Sayer. And the only song of Leo's that I could call to mind before that day was a ballad called When I Need You.
It's a great
And so I
tune, that.
thought, well, because you always think about what's the energy going to be like when we go on after Artist A or Artist B or whoever it is. And I thought there'll be no trouble. You know, got that ballad, we'll be fine. And I was side of stage while he was on, and he was wicked, absolutely wicked. Voice sounded great, loads of energy, a lot of up-tempo songs. And when he came off stage, I just had to say, man, your voice is sounding great. And he said, sing every day, man. Sing every day. That's my advice. So even if it's just running through some vocal exercises and scales, I try to put that discipline into action. I try to sing every day. And it's odd that having done this hundreds of times, last weekend I sang at a festival for the first time and I hadn't sung in weeks. And despite all those scales, yeah, there's some, I don't know. I remember seeing Bruce Springsteen on a recent chat show in the UK, and he was asked, you can't possibly still be nervous before a show now, having done what you've done and all these decades of performing. He said, I wouldn't call it nerves. He said, I'd call it anxious anticipation. And I can definitely relate to that. I don't know why it is that some part of my mind worries that something's going to go wrong and I'm not going to be able to do it because thankfully, most of the time, it goes pretty well.
I interviewed Mike Scott from the Waterboys a few weeks ago, and he played the Astor Theatre where you're playing as well. And I asked him about that sort of thing and what he gets up to during the day when he's on tour. And he said, like, in order to preserve his energy and give his absolute best on stage, like he does the absolute bare minimum. Like he's not out sightseeing, he doesn't get around all during the day. Do you know what I mean? Like I'm resting and saving my energy for the 2 and a bit hours that I'm on stage, just to give the audience who paid their money to come and see me the absolute best show that I possibly can. I thought that was a sensational way of looking at it and sort of respect for the audience. Do you know what I mean? Like that was great. I wanted to talk to you as well about King of Wishful Thinking, and that was obviously became a worldwide hit, helped in part, I think, by the Pretty Woman movie. Did that come across your desk and did you have to think about it, or weren't sure? Because, in hindsight, it's a no-brainer. But at the time, was it like a bit of a decision you had to make, or did you just jump at it?
It's a good question, actually, with a relevant answer, because our second album was underperformed, disappointing, and our record label said to Richard and to me, you're not giving us songs that we can work with, which wasn't an unreasonable observation. We had made a conscious decision to move away from writing more direct pop songs for the second album, which, as you could argue, was shooting ourselves in the foot. But anyway, that's a whole other conversation. And so what they said to us was, they gave us a new A&R man. I told him that I didn't like anything he was involved in. I don't know what came into my head that day. Anyway, I'm making this a longer answer than it needs to be. We had a year-long standoff with our record label. Nothing was happening. They weren't giving us any money or any freedom to do anything. And there came a point where I was actually wondering whether we would be making any more records. Circumstances conspired. Our original A&R man rescued us from that situation. He put me in touch with Martin Page, who co-wrote The King of Wishful Thinking with us. And when we were rescued from that wilderness and we were in LA, again, writing songs for what were going to be our next album, the first song we wrote was The King of Wishful Thinking. And in a classic example of right place, right time, EMI America were just putting together the soundtrack for Pretty Woman. And they said, yes, you've got a commercial song. We'd like to include it in this soundtrack. And Richard's reaction to that was, no, 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 I don't want to do that. We've been a year away. We're now finally back on track, writing songs for our next album. I don't want to interrupt that process to promote the film. Richard Gere, what's he done in the last 10 years? And who is Julia Roberts? Said Richard. Fortunately, he was wrestled to the ground and sense prevailed. And to go back to your setup for this question, I think Pretty Woman more than helped with the success of The King of Wishful Thinking. I don't know whether it would have been as successful as it has been if not for the film. So, I mean, we have had songs in half a dozen films in various contexts, I think. And you quickly learn that having a song in a film isn't necessarily going to go quite the way that you imagined it was going to go. So in the case of Pretty Woman, where if you've seen the film, the song is right at the start of the film when the audience are fully engaged, looking at the screen. There's no dialogue. Richard Gere is driving a car down from the Hollywood Hills into Beverly Hills, and you hear a whole verse and a whole chorus of the song. And that is very unusual in my experience of having songs in films.
You're listening to the Mixtape.
If you could go back and give 1985 Peter Cox some advice, what would you say?
I would say, get on with it. Yeah, we did what we did, writing songs for the second album by design. We made those decisions. But as you say, with the benefit of hindsight, knowing, as we all know, that pop is so disposable and audiences are always looking for the next thing, had we written 3, 4, 5 songs and then chosen some well-chosen covers, recognizable songs, and put that second album out 9 months or even a year earlier, things might have been very different. Whereas what actually happened was we went away to make that second record. Neither of us was really in a good frame of mind. We were definitely, obviously, feeling the pressure of following a very successful first album. And I think really possibly each of us knew we didn't really have the commercial songs for that second record. So my advice would be, don't hang about, get on with it, and, just strike while the iron is hot, as they say.
All right, I'm going to give you the quick fire 5 questions, Peter, that I give to everybody on the show. These are all based around touring and playing live. First one is, do you have a pre-show ritual?
Yeah, actually, I like to have a little bit of peace and quiet, which is very difficult to get. I love the Astor. I love the Astor Theatre. We've played there many times. But if you've been to the Astor, the backstage area / dressing rooms is like a communal area. So it's quite difficult to find a space to be away from drummers who are practicing with their drumsticks and in the past, horn sections who need to warm up and all that stuff. I like to sing my scales that I mentioned earlier because it's become a psychological ritual. I know how my voice feels, and if I sing those scales, I've got a pretty good idea of how operational it is. So that's it. I clean my teeth, I sing some scales, I might do some push-ups, and that's kind of it, really.
I'm heading to the Astor Theatre the second I hang up this call for a show tonight. Yes, I'm going to see Play Tempest, who's come to Perth. So I'm really excited for that. But I know what you mean about that venue. He's always busy and chaotic. What's on your tour rider, Peter? Anything weird or interesting?
No, not really. In the past, when we've asked for with all respect to venues and promoters everywhere, when we've asked for red and white wine, you typically get something that's undrinkable. And so without, on the basis of not wishing to be too demanding, first of all, plenty of still water. There's never enough water. As I mentioned earlier about your voice, you need that hydration. So bottles and bottles of still water, beer for the band. The band are generally happy with the beer. And then, because of the experience of having been given terrible undrinkable wine so many times in the past, I generally ask for a bottle of champagne on the basis that if it's got champagne on the label, it will at least hopefully be drinkable.
Can't be that bad. It can't be that bad. What's your favourite city to play live, Peter?
I'm not good with favorites. I mean, I can't tell you genuinely how excited I am to be touring Australia again. I love coming to Australia. I always have a great time. And as you can imagine, the cities on our tour tend to be the ones that you mentioned: Perth, Adelaide, Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, Hobart, and so on. I've had fantastic experiences in all those cities. I know that sounds like a cop out, but honestly, if going back to an earlier question, if you'd told me in 1985 that I'd be touring in Australia in 2026, I'd have said that sounds kind of unlikely. So I'm really aware of how lucky I am to be doing this thing that I love, playing with a fantastic band that I've handpicked. All these players, these are not just guys who just happen to be around at any given time. I have a really strong idea of how I want the songs to sound, how they'll best be played, and I choose these guys. And despite having had a fantastic, fortunate career, I've realized of late that the thing I've always really wanted to do, as modest as it sounds, is to stand in front of a wicked band and sing songs that I've had a hand in writing. That's it. That's the full ambition. And to still be doing that now, I don't take that for granted.
And finally, in this section, if you could time travel to any concert in history, which concert would you choose?
Hmm. Okay, well, off the top of my head, this might be too distant a historical reference point for your radio audience.
I've had
Uh,
They Might Be Giants wanted to go back to medieval times and listen to what music was like there. So you're good, mate. Yeah, yeah.
okay, no, I haven't got anything as wacky as that. I was going to say, when I was 17, 18, with the first idea that I might want to sing in a band, is not to be famous, not to make any money, just to sing in a band. The band that I was listening to was the British 70s rock band Free, and Paul Rodgers was the singer. And they had an album out at that time called Free Live, which was obviously a live recording of the band. And I was deep into that record in the days when, way before streaming, when you put the album on at the beginning and you played it until the end, etc., all those old guy points of view. But as I say, I was deep into that record. I could have sung you every tiny detail of every vocal lick that Rodgers sings on that album. And so if I could transport back in time, I'd like to have seen Free in their pomp when Paul Kossoff was not the worse for wear. And yeah, I would have loved to have seen that band live.
He was my first ever gig at the Kentish Town Forum. He had a Muddy Waters tribute album, I think, and it was a solo tour.
Yeah.
He had, I think, Gary Moore with him, Brian May was on the album, and loads of different
Yeah.
people. And that was a great show. That was a really good one. Good
Fantastic.
one. My first
Yeah.
ever show, yeah.
You're listening to The Mixtape.
All right, Peter, we'll get through the mixtape tracks quickly in the last sort of 10 minutes. Track one of your mixtape is an attention grabber, mate. What did you pick for that?
I picked New Sensation by In Excess because that is a very exciting intro to a record. I'm a bit of a guitar geek, and I was watching an Instagram from Guitar Man Cameron. He's a fantastic player, demonstrates guitars and so on. A blindingly good player, can emulate any of the modern day shredders. But he actually played the beginning of New Sensation, which is simple but brilliant. And he said, in his opinion, arguably one of the most catchy guitar parts of all time. And I go along with that. That makes you pricks up your ears, as they say.
I have had the absolute pleasure and privilege of interviewing Andrew Farris for the show. It was such a good one, and we were talking a lot about his guitar and playing and Harry. And the one for me is "Need You Tonight." I love that. There's like 3 different guitar parts going on in that song. If you listen to it, and the way they all fit together, it's just unbelievable. Yeah, fantastic choice, mate. Great one to kick it off with. And track 2, Peter. What is a song that you sing when you're on your own in the car or the shower?
Yeah, this was a tricky question to answer because honestly, I don't really sing that much for my own. I do this. No, it's not right to say I don't sing unless I'm getting paid.
Lloyd Cole told me that. He said, "I don't sing unless I'm getting paid." That was his answer to that question.
Yeah, well, you can sometimes, it's difficult when you're a so-called professional singer and you're in a social environment and everyone looks to you and says, go on, sing us a song. That's not a situation where you're going to really be able to acquit yourself well, I've found in my experience. Anyway, Marvin Gaye, the soundtrack to my teenage years largely was the Motown of that era. I always say, especially in this modern era, when the voices that audiences hear now on records have often been treated and tuned and that's fine. That's the modern day recording industry. What always just blows my mind, if you'll forgive the phrase, is that in the days of those Motown records, have stood in the studio at Hitsville, which at that time, I believe, was a 3-track recorder. So everything you hear on those records happened live in that room. And you can still hear, I think, an isolated vocal of Marvin Gaye singing. I heard it through the grapevine on a TV show, and it's just the vocal and the reverb. Man, just what an unbelievable singer. And of course, what's going on is a song, that has a vaguely political context, which is as relevant today as it was when he wrote it
Absolutely.
decades
Yeah.
ago.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Timeless track. Absolutely timeless track. Lyrically, just, sensational. Great one. Track 3. What's your favorite cover version?
I had a stab at this. I don't know why I did. I don't know what I was thinking, but my cover version is Donny Hathaway's version of Song for You, which was originally written by Leon Russell. I had to look that up actually to find out whether it was indeed a cover. But that whole Donny Hathaway live album is again just a masterclass in live vocals. And again, there's been no fiddling around, no fixing, no tuning. Again, what a wonderful sounding voice.
Jealous Guy. His version of Jealous Guy comes up a lot in that
Yeah.
category. That gets picked a lot.
Was on the list.
Yeah.
That was on the list, and that actually led me to Frankie Miller's cover of Jealous Guy. I was thinking, because Frankie Miller, awesome singer, and very much another one of those voices that were around in the soundtrack of my late teens. Yeah.
Do you know the Teskey Brothers, Australian band called the Teskey Brothers?
I do. I've had them much recommended to me. Yeah.
They're great. They do a live version, but they cover the Donny Hathaway Jealous Guy, if you know what I mean. It's a cover of a cover. They do it like that way. You're better sensational. I'm gagging to get them on the show. They're right at the top of my list of dream guests. All right, track 4. What's a song you wish you could play to your 18-year-old self, Peter?
Again, this was an interesting question, I thought, but I chose Sign of the Times by Prince because, well, first of all, what can you say about Prince? I mean, to say that there's never been anyone like him it goes without saying, really. But the reason I chose Sign of the Times is because it just, I wish I had that level of imagination I think not only is the lyric utterly brilliant, the middle 8 is just goes off to a place as middle 8 should do, in my opinion, the midsection of the song. But it just illustrates there's just no, what's the word I'm looking for? There are no boundaries. He's done something so different there, so imaginative. And not only is it just a fantastic piece of art, which is a word I don't often use, but it was also commercially successful. I mean, it's the best of all possible worlds. So I would have played that to my 18-year-old self as if to say, this is what you could do if you could just open your mind that far.
Sensational choice, mate, there. And track 5, a love song like we used to do back in the day, making up mixtapes for people we want to let know that we're interested in King. What would be a love song you would put on your mixtape for that, Peter?
Well, having said what a lazy concert goer I am, my neighbour bought me tickets to see the Brothers Landreth, Canadian duo. In this instance, it was a trio. What a fantastic gift. And we went to see them at a venue in London called Union Chapel, which is
my favourite London venue, that. I love.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I could live without sitting on those pews, I can tell
It's
you.
not, it's not the most comfortable, is it? He's an actor at
Most
church.
comfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the setting suited that trio that I saw so brilliantly, and those three guys sing. It's just, in fact, there's a moment in the show when the drummer takes a lead vocal, and you've sat there and watched an hour of, in my opinion, just the best thing. Now the bloody drummer's stepping up and singing a lead vocal. I turned around to my friend who bought the ticket and said, "Oh, off," you know.
Yeah.
Just, but anyway, the reason for mentioning this show, which was, again, there's different things, obviously one show, one artist can be dramatically different from another, but it was the best thing I've seen in a very, very long time. And Joey Landreth has just a wonderful voice, inspirational actually, in the sense that he sings quite quietly, I think. But as we said, the acoustics of the venue really suited. Their three voices were just about as perfect as live vocals can be. And he sang a song called Half of Me, which is off their album Dog Ear, which is their latest album, I think. And I was in tears, I'm not ashamed to say. It was really, really moving. And it seemed, as a reasonably contemporary choice, a good one for this particular question.
Yeah, sensational venue, that. And I got some real beard envy as well. When I checked them out on the socials earlier, they've got some fantastic beards going on in that band. Yeah, the Union Chapel, I saw Ray LaMontagne there, which was amazing. I saw Paolo Nutini there. I've seen, who else have I seen there? Jose Gonzalez, I've seen there. I've seen some absolutely amazing shows there. It's a great, great venue. Fantastic one. All right, finally, Peter, to round out your mixtape, a deep cut album track or B-side.
Yeah, and this was easier, really, because when I first met Richard, we didn't have any money, really, but we were both obviously mad into music. So we'd spend our evenings drinking terrible wine and listening to music. And as I've already mentioned, my focus was very narrowly the band Free and any of its offshoots. Richard's horizon was way wider, and he introduced me to West Coast American music, the Doobie Brothers, Steely Dan, and his own personal hero, I think it's fair to say, is Todd Rundgren. And this track, Pretending to Care, from the Todd's a cappella album, all the sounds you hear are Todd's voice. And it's a fabulous recording. It's a brilliant vocal, and it's a great lyric. So yeah, I chose it at least partly because Richard would first have played this to me and said, "This is my man Todd."
Fantastic choice, mate, to finish off your mixtape. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Peter. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you. Go West are touring Australia, coming to Perth, the Astor Theatre on Tuesday, the 25th of August, 28th Sydney, 29th Melbourne, 31st Adelaide, 2nd of September Hobart, and the 4th of September Brisbane. It is destroyalllions.com for tickets. Safe travels down under, Peter, and we'll see you when you get here. Thank you, mate.
Thank you very much, Bob. Take it easy,
Cheers,
mate.
Peter. Thank you, mate. Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Thank you so much for listening to this week's mixtape. If you enjoyed this show, then please subscribe to the podcast, rate it 5 stars, or leave comment on whichever platform you are listening. And don't forget, you can check out over 175 archive episodes just by visiting themixtapepodcast.com. There you'll also find social media links, YouTube channel, and the radio show, including the songs chosen by this week's guest. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.